on paper, 2019 hasn't been brilliant for George Russell. P20 dead last in the standings, a big fat 0 points, the only driver not to score a point. And yet, when you look a little bit deeper, and I mean a little bit deeper, this guy has been pretty great in his first year of Formula 1. It's been difficult to really prove his talent. Of course, last season, 2018 GP2, well, Formula 2, as it's now known, Formula 2 World Champion, beating out the likes of Lando Norris, Alex Albon, Nicholas Latifi, Nick De Vries, this year's F2 World Champion, not only beating them, but comfortably beating them. Mercedes Junior, of course, did the post-season test in Abu Dhabi, did the Bahrain test as well with Mercedes. But yeah, he came into Formula 1 with this bit of a buzz, but Williams in 2018 weren't great. This year, it's got worse, and that car has comfortably, all season long, been the worst on the grid, and not just the worst on the grid, the worst by quite a fair margin. I would say the only real chance they showed a bit of pace was in perhaps the final 4 rounds, where actually they were slowly starting to catch the Haas team, but that seemed to me more like the Haas team just dropped backwards, and hey, they had their own issues. But similarly to the 2 Haas drivers, I think it's really difficult to analyse the 2 Williams drivers. Of course, George, in his first year of Formula 1, being a rookie, Robert Kubica, who, yes, he's a multiple podium sitter, Grand Prix winner, pole sitter in Formula 1, but he's been out of Formula 1 for so long. He's had his own incredible story making it back to Formula 1. So really, in a sense, they're both 2 rookies to the sport, both George and Robert. So it's hard to really suggest where either of the 2 of them are compared to the rest of the grid. The car has been so bad, it's super hard to compare them to the rest of the grid. So take everything I say today with a pinch of salt, but I think what we've seen in 2019 is George Russell is the real deal. Not just on track, but off track as well. Considering how awful this year has been, the maturity levels we have seen from him, I've been very impressed with, and don't get me wrong, he's had a bit of a laugh along the way, and he's got a brilliant relationship with all the new rookies in Formula 1 this year. But already, I think Williams have got themselves a very special driver here, and is really going to help them in the rebuilding process. Some statistics look a little bit like this, and if you don't already know, 21-0 George Russell was able to do in qualifying over the season in qualifying. Not bad whatsoever. The only driver to do it in 2019. The last person to do that was last year, Alonso on Stoffel Van Dorn. The race battle was 17-3 with both drivers retiring at the Russian Grand Prix. The points battle goes to big Robbo Kubica. 1 single point to Robert, a big fat 0 to George. And this is what I mean when I said at the beginning of the video that on paper it doesn't look great, and I can understand for a casual fan. I've noticed a bit of a trend this year. When I've said, oh, Russell I think's really good, they've said, well, why do you think that? Look at his statistics. No wins, no poles, no podiums, no points, last in the championship standings. And yet it was that consistency in qualifying over his teammate, a best qualifying result of P16 in Hungary, and a best race result of P11, 1 position off the points, but also was P12 in Brazil, just 2 places off the points. So he got super close, but it really was down to the fact that Williams' car was so bad. And in that German Grand Prix where Kubica did get the point, that was one of the few occasions that Kubica was probably the better of the 2. And don't forget, that was George Russell's first ever time in the wet in Formula 1. But he did make a little mistake. Robert got past, and on the day, fair play to Robert, he got the point. And I tried to analyse that and mention that in the video, in my video for Robert Kubica, is that his slight bit of experience really came into play on that day. But I'm not saying George was bad that weekend. He really wasn't. A little bit like I said with Alex Albon and Lando Norris to a degree, considering that was all of their first ever time in the wet in Formula 1, considering Hamilton, Bottas, Hulkenberg, Sainz, Leclerc not so much because he's not as experienced, but considering all of those drivers were making mistakes, fair play that they got to the end. And Brazil, Russell really, not only did he finish P12, and yes, there are all sorts of crazy shenanigans going on in that race as well, he was getting in the mix with the 2 Haas cars, and definitely There was signs of that early on in the year. Magnussen had a few races where he would qualify great, have a grid penalty, and just couldn't get through the field. Roman was well, not making it to the end of the Grand Prix, having his own issues with awful reliability on the car with that Haas as well, was not helping either driver. But Russell was getting involved, and some of the overtakes he was doing in a car that wasn't great, in the top 10, what was it, starts of the year, George Russell in Hungary was so good. For me, that was the best opening lap of the entire season from any driver. He's been super good. The car hasn't. I'm going to give George Russell an 8 out of 10. One of the better scores I've given for the rookies, but very close with Albon and Norris. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.